She warned me with a smile, "I'm old enough to be your mother." But the way her eyes lingered on mine, it felt like fate had other plans. I still remember the first evening I walked through the door of my friend's house. It wasn't anything special on the surface, just a casual dinner after a long day, a promise we had made to catch up. The living room was warmly lit, carrying that lived-in coziness only a family home has. But then she appeared, and the atmosphere shifted without warning. She moved with a quiet grace, the kind that isn't flashy but impossible to ignore. She was my friend's mother, yet in that moment, nothing about her presence felt ordinary. At 42, she had the kind of beauty that spoke of life experience, not the fleeting charm of youth, but something deeper, steadier. Her hair was pulled back loosely, a few strands falling forward to frame her face, and when she smiled politely at me, I caught myself holding my breath. The scent of roasted chicken and herbs drifted from the kitchen, mingling with faint notes of her perfume, warm, subtle, lingering. My friend was talking, laughing about something I can't even recall, because my attention was already divided. Every detail about her seemed magnified, the way she adjusted the sleeves of her soft cardigan, the calm rhythm of her voice as she asked if I wanted more water, the faint creases near her eyes when she laughed. Dinner was simple but felt strangely intimate. She placed the dishes on the table, moving between us with ease. At one point, as she set a bowl in front of me, her hand brushed mine, just for a second. It could have meant nothing. But the warmth of her touch stayed with me, as if my skin had memorized it before my mind had a chance to. Our eyes met more than once that evening. Not in any obvious, reckless way, but in those fleeting, accidental moments where time seemed to pause. Her gaze was steady, thoughtful, almost searching. I wondered if she saw the same curiosity in me that I saw in her. What struck me most wasn't her appearance alone, it was the contradiction she carried. She was confident, almost commanding in the way she carried herself, yet I caught glimpses of something quieter behind her composure. A faint shadow in her eyes, the kind that suggested a heart that hadn't been truly seen in a long while. By the end of that first dinner, I realized something dangerous yet undeniable: she wasn't just my friend's mom anymore. She had become someone I couldn't easily forget. Later that evening, after dinner had settled and the house grew quieter, I found myself sitting in the living room with her. My friend had stepped out for a while, something about a quick errand, leaving me alone in her presence. I hadn't planned it, and neither had she, but the silence between us carried a weight that felt almost intentional. She entered with 2 cups of tea, the steam curling into the dim light like soft ribbons. "I hope you don't mind chamomile," she said, her voice low, smooth, carrying a trace of weariness. I shook my head, grateful for something to hold, though my hands were steadier than I expected. We sat across from each other, the lamp casting a warm amber glow over her features. She had changed into a simple knit sweater, comfortable yet elegant, the kind of clothing that whispered more about her personality than her style. She carried herself with that quiet confidence I'd noticed earlier, but up close, I caught hints of vulnerability too, the way her fingers tightened briefly around her cup, the slight pause before she spoke again. Then, almost as if she was testing the air, she gave a soft smile and said, "You know, I'm old enough to be your mother." The words lingered in the space between us, sharp yet oddly tender. She meant it as a boundary, I could tell, but also as a confession. It was both a warning and a shield, one she wasn't sure I'd push against. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. I could have laughed it off, shrugged, or changed the subject. But instead, I leaned forward slightly, resting my elbows on my knees, and let my voice drop into something honest. "Maybe. But all I see right now is someone who doesn't need to measure her worth by years." Her eyes widened a little, then softened, the guarded humor in her smile faltering into something more real. She didn't answer right away, and in that pause, the world outside seemed to fade. All I could hear was the quiet tick of the clock on the wall, the faint clink of her cup as she set it down, and the steady rhythm of my own breathing. When our eyes locked again, it wasn't the accidental kind of glance from dinner. This time, it was deliberate, a silent acknowledgement of something neither of us dared to name. For the first time that night, I saw her as more than just graceful or attractive. I saw her as a woman who was used to hiding pieces of herself, and as someone who, maybe, wanted me to see past the shield she carried. The conversation drifted, gently at first, from light remarks about books and music into something heavier, something that pulled us both inward. She didn't plan it, I could tell, but sometimes truth spills when the room is too quiet to hide in. Her fingers circled the rim of her cup as if tracing a secret she couldn't quite speak. "It's funny," she said softly, "how people can be surrounded all the time, and still feel invisible." She gave a small, self-conscious laugh, though her eyes didn't match the sound. "You learn to smile, to keep everything in order." But some days, her voice faded, caught on words she didn't want to finish. I sat back, watching her. For a moment I didn't answer, afraid that if I spoke too quickly I'd break the fragile honesty she had just laid down between us. Instead, I let her continue. She glanced up at me, as if measuring whether I could handle her truth. "I've spent years being dependable. For my son, for my family, for everyone who needed me. And yet, I can't remember the last time someone looked at me and actually saw me, not the mother, not the hostess, not the woman who holds everything together, just me." Her words struck deeper than she knew. There was no drama in her voice, no plea for sympathy. It was simply an unguarded truth, and it broke something open inside me. I leaned forward, resting my hand over hers. The contact was simple, but it carried weight, the kind of touch that didn't ask for permission, but offered presence. Her skin was warm, delicate, and when she stilled, I thought she might pull away. Instead, her fingers tightened, ever so slightly, around mine. "I see you," I said quietly. "Even if no one else does. I see the strength, the loneliness, and the part of you that just wants to be held without asking for it." For a heartbeat, her composure cracked. Her eyes glistened, though no tears fell, and in that flicker of vulnerability, I realized how long she had kept this part of herself hidden. She turned her hand, letting her palm rest against mine fully, as though giving me permission to carry a weight no one else had been trusted with. The clock ticked on. The tea cooled. But none of it mattered. What mattered was that, for the first time in years, she allowed someone to see the woman beneath all the titles. And what mattered even more, I wanted to keep seeing her, no matter the cost. After a while, my friend still hadn't returned, and she excused herself to tidy up. I stood, almost instinctively, to help. She protested at first, smiling with that practiced politeness, but there was no real resistance when I followed her into the kitchen. We moved side by side, stacking dishes, wiping the table, not saying much, and yet every moment felt heavier than it should. When she reached for a tray on the counter, I noticed her shawl slip slightly from her shoulder. It wasn't intentional, I knew that, but something about the sight of her, elegant and unguarded in that small imperfection, made my chest tighten. I stepped closer, carefully, and with just 2 fingers adjusted the fabric back into place. My knuckles grazed her collarbone. She froze for the briefest second, then exhaled softly, as if the gesture was both unexpected and too much to name. Later, when she mentioned she needed to bring something out to the porch, I offered to carry it. She didn't argue. Together we stepped into the cool night air. The world outside was quiet, the street lined with dim lamps and the soft silver of moonlight brushing over the pavement. The breeze carried the faint rustle of leaves, and for a moment, the stillness felt like it belonged only to us. We walked slowly, not because the distance demanded it but because neither of us wanted the night to end too quickly. She clutched the edge of her shawl against the breeze, and without thinking, I offered my arm. She hesitated, her eyes flicking to mine, then, almost shyly, she slipped her hand through. The contact was light, but my pulse responded as if she had spoken the truth out loud. We said very little. Sometimes silence is more intimate than words. The rhythm of our steps matched, and I became aware of how near she was, the warmth of her body against my side, the faint scent of her perfume rising every time the wind shifted. When we reached her doorway again, we both paused. She didn't step inside right away. Her gaze lingered on the street, then dropped to the space between us, as though searching for a safe distance that no longer existed. "I shouldn't," she began, but her voice trailed, her breath trembling with a conflict she couldn't mask. I didn't move closer, didn't push. I only stayed, waiting, letting the night itself decide if this was the moment where her barriers would finally give way. The porch light flickered faintly above us, throwing soft golden shadows across her face. She looked at me, then away, her hand still resting lightly against my arm. For a long moment, she seemed caught between stepping inside and staying out here in the night with me. Finally, she let out a quiet laugh, brittle at the edges. "This is ridiculous," she murmured, shaking her head. "I'm old enough to know better." Old enough to, her words faltered, and she didn't finish. I could hear the conflict in her voice, see it in the way her shoulders tensed beneath the shawl. She was battling herself, the part that told her this connection was impossible, and the part that longed to surrender to it. She turned back to me, her eyes searching, almost pleading. "You're young. You have your whole life ahead of you. I shouldn't even be standing here, letting this feel like something more than it is." Her honesty cut deeper than any rejection could have. Because it wasn't that she didn't feel it, it was that she did, too much. I stepped closer, not invading, but enough to close the space that had been trembling between us. My voice lowered, steady, though my heart was hammering. "You're not wrong for wanting to be loved." Her breath caught. For a moment, her composure slipped, her lips parting slightly, her eyes softening into something raw. She looked away, blinking quickly, as though steadying herself against the weight of what I had just said. The night air pressed around us, cool and still, amplifying the silence. I could hear the faint sound of distant cars, the whisper of leaves stirred by the breeze. And beneath it all, the rhythm of my own pulse, loud in my chest, as I waited for her to speak again. When she finally did, her voice was quieter than before, tinged with something she hadn't allowed herself to reveal until now. "It's been so long, since anyone said that to me." I wanted to tell her everything, that she didn't have to hide behind her age, that I saw her strength and her softness, that what I felt wasn't some fleeting infatuation. But I didn't. Instead, I let my hand brush against hers, slow and deliberate, an invitation without demand. She didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers curled around mine, tentative at first, then firmer, as though clinging to the truth she'd been too afraid to accept. And in that small, wordless moment, I realized the wall she had built around her heart had finally begun to crack. The silence stretched between us, heavy and fragile all at once. Her fingers lingered in mine, as though she wanted to let go but couldn't quite bring herself to. The porch light above hummed faintly, casting a halo around her face, and for the first time, I could see the quiet storm in her eyes, desire, fear, longing, restraint. She drew in a slow breath, her lips parting like she wanted to speak, but the words never came. Instead, she took one hesitant step closer. The shawl slipped slightly from her shoulders, revealing the curve of her neck in the dim glow, and in that moment, it felt like the world had narrowed to just the two of us. I didn't move. I didn't need to. This was her choice, her moment. If she wanted distance, she had only to step back. But she didn't. Instead, she let her hand trail upward from my palm to my forearm, a trembling touch that carried more weight than any confession. Her eyes lifted to mine, glistening in the porch light, and for a heartbeat, time itself seemed to pause. Then she closed the distance. Her arms slipped gently around my waist, almost cautiously, as if she was afraid I might vanish if she held me too tightly. Her cheek rested lightly against my chest, and I felt the quiet steadiness of her heartbeat, fragile yet certain, pressed against mine. I let my arms circle her slowly, one hand resting at the small of her back, the other tracing the edge of her shawl where it had fallen. The warmth of her body seeped into me, grounding me in a way words never could. She exhaled, a sound caught somewhere between relief and surrender. I don't know why I'm doing this, she whispered, her voice muffled against me. I bent my head, speaking softly into her hair. Maybe because it feels right. For a long moment, neither of us moved. We simply stayed there, wrapped in each other, letting the night carry our silence. The air smelled faintly of jasmine from the garden, and the cool breeze brushed against the warmth we shared, making the embrace feel even more necessary. When she finally lifted her head, her eyes were no longer guarded. They were tender, vulnerable, and filled with something she had been trying to deny all evening. Her hand rose, brushing lightly against my jaw, her thumb grazing the corner of my mouth. It wasn't a kiss, not yet. But it was everything before a kiss. A promise waiting on the edge of courage. And in that suspended breath, I knew, this was the moment we could never return from. Her touch lingered at my jawline, soft and deliberate, as though she was memorizing the shape of a moment she wasn't sure she deserved. Her eyes searched mine, wide and vulnerable, and for the first time tonight she looked less like the untouchable woman I had admired from afar, and more like someone standing on the edge of letting herself be seen. I shouldn't want this, she whispered. The words trembled with both fear and honesty, her thumb brushing against my skin like she was half hoping the touch alone could answer her doubts. I held her gaze, steady, unflinching. You don't have to explain what your heart already knows, I said quietly. You're not wrong for this. You're not wrong for being wanted. Her breath caught. She blinked once, as though my words had unraveled the last knot she'd been clinging to. Then, with a sigh that sounded almost like surrender, she rested her forehead against mine. The world shrank into that single point of contact, the warmth of her skin, the closeness of her breath, the soft trembling between us. The porch light flickered again, the faint hum of the evening pressing in around us. It was late, the kind of hour where silence feels sacred. And in that silence, something shifted. The fear that had defined every pause between us began to fade, replaced by something quieter, steadier. She smiled then, just barely, her lips curving with a softness that held both relief and wonder. Maybe age doesn't matter, she murmured, almost to herself. Not when two people feel this. I drew her closer, my arms wrapping around her more firmly now, no hesitation left. You're perfect enough to be mine tonight, I whispered against her hair, and every night after. She closed her eyes, a tear slipping free though her smile remained. Not a smile of doubt, but of release. Of finally allowing herself to believe in the impossible. We stayed there, holding each other in the quiet, until the night itself seemed to fold around us. There was no urgency, no need for anything more than the warmth of being close, the steady rhythm of her heartbeat against mine, and the unspoken promise that neither of us would forget this. For years, she had been seen as only one thing, a mother, a provider, someone strong enough to carry others but never carried herself. And now, standing in my arms, she allowed herself to be more, a woman, tender and deserving, finally seen. And me? I knew then that this wasn't just a fleeting moment under a porch light. This was the beginning of something real, something fragile but worth every risk. The night ended not with fireworks, not with scandal, but with two hearts finally finding where they belonged.